Good afternoon, everyone. I apologize that we reconvened a few minutes later than anticipated, so thank you for your patience. And welcome to the City of Waterloo Council meeting of September, gosh, I'm losing track of the date, September 18th. And I just wanted to start with a territorial acknowledgement. And today's acknowledgement is being read in conjunction with National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, which is September 30th, and the Sisters in Spirit Day on October the 4th. Unfortunately, we don't have a council meeting on the 28th, so this is our closest meeting to that time. So I'd like to read this. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which many of us are gathered today is the land traditionally cared for by the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and neutral peoples. We also acknowledge the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today. We offer this acknowledgement, a small act of reconciliation, at a time when, as a community and as a nation, we are turning our attention to learning and taking action for change. September 30th marks the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, a day to honor the children who never returned home and the survivors of residential schools, as well as their families and communities. October 4th is Sisters in Spirit Day, a day to raise awareness about missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. The proximity of these days to each other emphasizes the profound impact of colonialism and racism on the lives of Indigenous people. The violence and injustice experienced by Indigenous children and their families at the hands of residential schools continues to be present in the form of disproportionate levels of violence against Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people in the face of a system that does not deliver answers or justice. The truth is difficult, but we cannot skip it on the way to reconciliation. We encourage all residents of our city and region to stop, reflect, learn, and act, explore the many learning resources curated by our local libraries, unlearn biases and reject negative stereotypes about Indigenous people, wear orange, attend upcoming events to remember and honor survivors, as well as events that celebrate Indigenous culture and contributions. Donate to local Indigenous-led organizations. As a city, we recommit ourselves to continued learning about and the grappling with the truth during this time of reflection and remembrance. We further commit to the year-round and long-term work of reconciliation with the goal of creating a better community for the 7 generations yet to come. In preparation for this year's National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, the City Ready team provided Mayor McCabe and City Council these orange shirts that feature the unique design by Alana Morningstar Jewel. And I'm sorry, I know I'll pronounce Alana's full native name incorrectly, of Morningstar Designs from the exclusive collection developed in partnership with the University of Waterloo's Office of Indigenous Relations. The artwork is a representation of the wildlife and ecosystem of the Grand River. The design depicts herons taking flight, drawing energy from the Haudenosaunee Great Tree of Peace, and florals growing beside the riverbed, flowing up towards the moon, which controls the waters and has a deep connection to the Grand River. The elements come together to signify the cylindrical and reciprocal relationship between the wildlife, the moon, and the river. A limited number of the shirts will be available for staff to purchase as well, but additional shirts can be purchased at the W Store and online at wstore.ca at any time while quantities last. A significant portion of the proceeds from the sale of these orange shirts will be directed to support the Indigenous Student Success Fund on campus, established to provide financial assistance to those Indigenous students who are most at risk of abandoning their education due to financial hardship. Another local resource for orange shirts is Healing of the 7 Generations. So I'm just going to hold up the shirts that we received. I think they're very lovely, and I'll look forward to wearing mine on September 30th, if not before. So thank you to the Ready team for that. I'm not sure if they're here today. Oh, great. Brian, would you mind just pronouncing correctly Elena's Anishinaabe name? I would like to recognize her by her proper name.
Thank you, Chair, but I have issues pronouncing that name as well. Even though we are both Haudenosaunee people, the pronunciation of our names is something that is given to us when a name is given to us. So I know she is very well versed in stating what her name is, but people who don't know her that well will have an issue with pronouncing that name, and I don't want to give that discredit either. So, but I appreciate you asking for that. Yonko.
Oh, sorry. With that, I'm going to turn once again to council for a disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof. Seeing none. The first item for our consideration is an appeal of the sign variance decision of the sign variance committee for Capital City Shopping Centre Limited, the Goodwill, at 428 King Street North. And we have a presentation that will be provided by Mr. Noseworthy. Can you just introduce yourself, please, and state your municipality of residence?
Yes, good afternoon, Mayor, members of council. My name is Jason Noseworthy. I'm a project manager with Priority Permits, and I'm representing the Goodwill signage appeal on behalf of the property owner and Goodwill. Can I get started with the presentation? Sorry. Okay, perfect. So I guess just to start, thank you for your time and your consideration and allowing me to speak on this appeals application. Sorry. I do appreciate the opportunity to speak, and it's definitely a very important matter for Goodwill. If we could go on, next slide here. So moving on to the proposal here. So the signage proposal that we're looking at here, so what we're proposing is a little bit outside of these sign bylaw regulations. So we're looking at sign 1 as circled in the slide here, which is the sign on the southwest corner of the building. And this sign is replacing an existing sign from the previous tenancy, which was a Starbucks location and a Chapters location. And they also had signage in the same locations that we're proposing here for Goodwill. So moving on there as well. So just because we're going over the sign bylaw deficiencies, so where we don't comply with the bylaw. So the max area for a sign within sign zone H, which is where this property is situated, would be 4.5 square meters for this particular sign. We're actually proposing a sign which is 7.01 square meters, which is actually less than the previous sign, which was on that same wall, which was for Chapters, which is actually greater in sign area than what we're proposing. Moving on to the next slide here. So the site conditions, so listing what was previously there. So the previous tenant, as I mentioned, was Chapters, which was also Indigo and Starbucks as sort of part of that tenancy as well. And on their building, they contained 4 identification wall signs at the south elevation, 1 identification wall sign on the north elevation, and they also contained identification panels on each of the 2 freestanding pylon signs, multi-tenant pylon signs on site. So what we're proposing for Goodwill is 3 identification wall signs, which is 1 less than the previous tenant had, also with less sign area than the previous tenant. What has already been approved and was also in the proposal was 3 canopy directional signs. We do have pictures of all these signs later in the slides here. 1 direct wall directional sign, which provides wayfinding to the donation center drop-off section for the Goodwill's donation center. And so Goodwill is replacing the Chapters signs sort of in the same locations, and they're also proposing to replace the existing panels on the existing freestanding pylon signs. So the overview of adjacent premises here. So if we look at these 2 maps here, we have a zoning map and as well the sign zone map for the intersection where the Goodwill is located. The Goodwill premise is highlighted there. It's circled in red on the image to the right. So as you can see, all the properties surrounding this intersection at the King Street North and Weber Street North are zoned C1 commercial. So this is a very commercial intersection. There's no residential premises at the in the adjacent area. You know, everything here is commercial. All the properties are within sign zone H as well. And so moving on to the next slide here. So here's a couple pictures of the surrounding area at this intersection and some similar signs, if not larger than what we're proposing for Goodwill. So the first one here is Farm Boy, which is actually just across the street from the Goodwill location. And they have, it's a new location here. They've just been built in the last few years here. And as you can see, the sign on the corner of the intersection there is significantly larger than 4 square meters, and they would be subject to the same imposing max sign area regulations as the Goodwill location here. As well, Canadian Tire, you can see their signage as well is again significantly larger than 4.5 square meters, and they have significantly more than 4 signs. I mean, I think where their proposal there is similar to what we're looking to achieve with Goodwill, is that they have a lot of signage which isn't necessarily identifying Canadian Tire. Likewise, with Goodwill, we have a lot of signs which are identifying the donation center. The Canadian Tire also has signage identifying more of the, the directional signs for their customers stating, the garage doors for tire services, oil change services, and the likes. As well, there's a Sport National, which is in the same property on the same parcel of land as Goodwill. And I believe this business is no longer in operation, but their signage was existing and was significantly larger as well than the 4.5 square meter maximum sign area for the sign zone H. Moving on to the next slide here. As well, we have Wholesale Club. Again, they're on the same premise as Goodwill in the same lot, and their sign is significantly larger again than that 4.5 square meter regulation. Moving on there as well, there's an East Side Mario's. It's not at that particular intersection. I believe it's 1 block away. And again, they have signs on the wall as well, as you can see pictured here to the right of their building, which are tremendously larger than 4.5 square meters in sign area. Moving on as well, I'm not sure how to pronounce the name of this business, unfortunately. Paquette Taverns. They also have their sign area significantly larger than the 4.5 square meters as we're proposing, and which is allowed within the sign zone H, which all these premises are located within. So looking at the existing signs, what was on the building prior to Goodwill taking over this location. So here's a look at the existing signage for Chapters. This is the northwest corner of their tenancy. And you can see they had a sign located on the northwest corner of the building, very similar to what we have proposed for Goodwill. And we actually do have a sign which was approved, and we have a permit in place to replace that sign with another sign for Goodwill. But what we're looking at here is the multi-tenant ground sign there, which contains signage panels for Wholesale Club, Chapters, and National Sport at this time. But the variance condition for the approval for the sign we're looking for a variance for was that the Goodwill not be allowed to use any panels on the existing multi-tenant ground sign, which is just not really in line with the best interest for the property. I just don't think it would make sense to have a large illuminated white panel with no copy on it, where there could be there's potential for advertising for Goodwill, especially considering that the previous tenant at the same location was also able to utilize their presence on a panel on the existing ground signs, in addition to the signs on the building that they also had. And on the next slide here, so this is some more previous signage for the Chapters location here. And this is on the southwest corner, so this is where the sign variance that we have approved with conditions was approved at. So the Chapters sign on the corner is being replaced with a new Goodwill sign. And that Goodwill sign is, as I mentioned, 7.01 square meters, which is over the maximum of 4.5 square meters allowance. But as you can see here, I mean, the Chapters sign that was existing in place was already tremendously larger than the 4.5 square meters. And they also had additional signs for Starbucks and for Indigo, which are all operating within one unit within this building. And I think this is the last slide I have here for the existing signage. So again, this is another Chapter sign. This one is on the southeast corner of the building. And we've proposed to replace this sign, which has already been approved, with a donation center sign, as this area will be the donation center for Goodwill, where members of the public can come to donate and drop off items, which can be sold at discounted rates for used goods. And so looking at the, a view of the site while traveling northbound on King Street North, you can see, so we have the pylon sign to the left is circled, and it's actually completely behind trees. So when those trees are in full bloom in the spring, summer, and for most of the fall, that existing pylon sign would be completely invisible for anyone traveling northbound on King Street West. So as such, having a panel on that pylon sign particularly, especially for the northbound, is not really giving us a huge visibility increase. But you can also see that we have another approved sign, which is also for Goodwill channel letters and logo to the right side of the building there. Now you can see the approved sign. It has actually already been installed and is noted there in that the small highlighted section in red. But the problem is, until you're right at the intersection of traveling northbound, when you've stopped at those traffic lights, that's the only opportunity you'll have to see that approved sign as is. So if Goodwill does not have a sign in the same location as the previous chapter sign on that southwest corner of the building there, they won't have any visibility for any traffic traveling northbound on King Street North, which is a huge volume of the public, which would completely miss this location entirely. It would be almost invisible. And again, so this is a picture of that same section of the intersection here, the same corner. And you can see as well, there's, the approved sign is almost invisible from that area. It's at such an angle to the wall that, it's practically, it's impossible to read. So unfortunately, without having that sign as proposed from our variance on the southwest corner of that wall there, again, traveling eastbound on Weber Street North, this location would be completely invisible again. So currently, traveling northbound on King Street North and eastbound on Weber Street North, there is almost no identification signage visible to the general public to identify what's even in this building. So moving on to the conditions. So our variance, we did go through the variance process, and the variance was approved with conditions. The first condition of approval was that the signage should be equipped with a timer and that the lighting be dimmed between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. This is the least concerning of the conditions imposed, as I'm fairly certain that most of the other signs in this area would have the same stipulation. But again, as you can see, this was, per the previously demonstrated maps, this is an entirely commercial intersection. So having illuminated signage, even between the hours of 11 p.m. and 7 a.m., would have no negative impact on any nearby residential premises. And since everything else is commercial, if there are any other illuminated signs in the area permitted to be illuminated in that time frame, it would have the same impact as those existing signs as well. Condition number 2 of the variance approval was that the applicant not erect any signage on the existing freestanding signs. So there are 2 existing multi-tenant signs, which are visible in this slide here. And again, it's just a matter of if Goodwill is not able to utilize those sign panels, it's just going to be a white panel as is visible in the far right picture in the top right of the slide. And those are just illuminated white panels. So in that area, that's just going to be a very bright white panel. There's no way to turn off the illumination individual per panel. So that would have to remain illuminated just based on the way that sign was built and constructed. So it would just be a white illuminated box with no copy. And it just seems like a wasted opportunity, right?
Just wanted to give you a heads up, you got 15 seconds left.
Oh,
of
okay.
your 10-minute.
Yep, and then the final condition there was that sign 3 as shown was approved, and the condition be that this sign not be installed. But the donation center sign is key and critical to wayfinding for patrons donating to Goodwill, as well for Goodwill's day-to-day operations, as it is a very, very large part of their day-to-day business. And I think that's pretty much where we have time for today. So I will say, so thank you very much for the opportunity to speak and for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Council, questions for the delegation? Councillor Vasek.
Thanks for your presentation. A couple of questions for you. Much of the start of the presentation was about the sign at the corner, but I just wanted to clarify, because I clarified with staff as well after I read the appeal, that you are permitted the increase. That wasn't a condition. It just, from the presentation, it sounded like you were trying to get the increase in sign.
Yes, that is correct. So we were granted the variance, but the variance conditions are sort of what we're looking to hopefully overturn today.
Okay, I guess it's just, it seemed how the presentation was and how the appeal came across was that there was concern about the committee not increasing the sign, and it almost, to overemphasize that, to almost make it seem like the sign variance committee wasn't being fair in that regard, but that actually was, so anyways, it just seemed to take up a lot more time than when it wasn't really an issue. So it's, anyways. And then the donation sign, the top one. So my question is, how does Goodwill know that customers need the wayfinding? Like, I think a lot of people know that you can donate to Goodwill, and so I was just curious why they need additional wayfinding sign at the top. That's kind of actually hard to see anyhow, from every distance, because I've driven it and donated there, and found the blue signs completely sufficient. So I was just curious why it needs wayfinding when we know you can donate, and also when it's kind of hard to see anyhow.
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, the reason they really need this donation center sign here on the wall, it's just a matter of the size of the copy. They already have the donation center signs on the extended canopy over that entrance to the building. However, that canopy signage, the lettering is quite small. So from a distance, if you're not already on the property, it's very difficult for those signs to be legible. So for the signs, from approaching, especially from Weber Street, heading northbound before it curves around to the west there, the sign it's definitely a lot more visible and legible to have that donation sign center on the wall, which is significantly larger in the size and the height of the copy. It just makes it more legible. Otherwise, that signs on the canopy are definitely a little bit harder to read.
Okay, thanks. I have a couple of questions for staff when the time is right.
Thank you. Any other questions, council, for the delegation? Okay, thank you. I appreciate your time. You can have a seat, Mr. Noseworthy, and then council will proceed with their consideration of this variance. So, questions for staff? Councillor, I'll start with Councillor Wright, and then Councillor Vasek, you had questions as well?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I just want to clarify that we're only dealing with condition 2, condition 3, and condition 4. So condition 2 is the sign dimming. Condition 3 is the sign on the north side of the property that's not affixed to the building. And condition 4 is the duplication on the donation, on the fascia, and on the portico.
Through you, Chair Freeman, that's correct, except I'll just clarify that, so condition 2, yes, it's the timer and the dimming. Condition 3, just to be completely clear, it is the freestanding sign.
Yes.
So it is, there are actually 2 freestanding signs on in front of that building adjacent to King Street. So dealing with the freestanding signs and the ability to put signage on the freestanding sign in relation to Goodwill or the donation center. And then condition 4, exactly as you indicated, that larger donation center fascia sign that is above above the canopy.
And just as a follow-up, was there any discussion regarding the duplication of the donation sign in favor of the larger fascia sign? I'm just wondering because if legibility on the I don't know what you call it, the portico kind of thing, where you drive under, I've actually donated, so I have some site familiarity. But clearly the visibility is from the fascia sign, so I'm just wondering if there was any discussion about that.
Through you, Chair Freeman, my understanding, based on discussions with the committee, the sign variance committee, is that the concern was the amount of signage and whether or not all of the signage was necessary. again, given that the canopy did have already 3 donation centers indicators on the canopy itself, and then the donation sign was above it. That was my understanding based on the committee.
Okay, and then just one more point of clarification. So in that regard, condition 4 would be about removing the larger, more legible version of the sign and not the one that is on the overhang portico.
Through you, Chair Freeman, yes, that the condition 4 speaks only to the fascia sign and does not speak to the donation center indicators on the side of the canopy.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Basak.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm just curious if you can speak a little bit more to the different requirements between chapters and now what is being requested.
Sure. Through you, Chair Freeman, to Councillor Basak. We did take a bit of look at chapters and just the history there with the existing or the previous signage that was on the building before Goodwill took over the property. And we confirmed that the site plan would have been approved in and around 1997. Building permits likely would have been issued around 1998 is what we could determine. So our current sign bylaw was approved and enacted in 2016. The previous bylaw to that was about 2005. I'm not sure what the bylaw looked like in 1997 and what the regulations would have contained in that bylaw, but I can tell you they likely would have been quite different. The bylaw that is subject to the application and the sign permit applications that were before the city, of course, had to adhere to the 2016 sign bylaw.
Okay, thank you. And then just to the delegate's point about it being sort of a white, bright light in the freestanding sign and sort of the lack of aesthetic appeal to that. I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think somebody else would use it? Do you think that the sign should go on there or it should stay blank?
Through you, Chair Freeman, to Councillor Vasak. There are options. This appeal is before council to make a decision. In my report, there are 3 options of how you could proceed. If the decision of council is to uphold the sign variance committee's decision, then I guess decisions would need to be made with respect to the property owners on what to do with that space, whether it could be provided to another future user of the site. I think I mentioned that in my report. Whether there's some, right now it's a light, it doesn't mean that there couldn't be some sort of, capping put over top of it to put, bring down the lighting. So there is an issues of illumination. I'm sure there are options that could be explored. As far as what those really are, I think we'd have to take a look at that.
Can I ask one follow-up? Yeah, thanks. So when you say future tenants, do you mean future tenants of different buildings on the site? Or are there enough spots on the freestanding sign for Goodwill to have one? It says there that there's a future no frills site. I think there's a big sign saying that. There's a Sam's Club. So do they have enough signs for all of the buildings that are there?
Through you, Councillor Freeman, or Chair Freeman, to Councillor Vasak. I mean, it's a larger shopping center that has newer tenants going in as well as potential future ones. So there are some opportunities there for advertising for others.
Other questions of staff? Councillor Rowe?
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Natalie. I just wondered if you could speak a little bit to the removal of the sign. I just through the presentation that there was an approval and just how that played out and the decision behind that.
Certainly, through you, Chair Freeman. The history a little bit on this with respect to staff is I know that Goodwill came in and had a number of signs that they were going to advance. Our staff worked with them to bring down the number of signs so that it was in compliant with the sign bylaw with respect to the number and location and size. So at that time, there were a number of permits that were issued. I do identify what those permits are in table 1 of my staff report. after those permits were issued, then there was a variance that came forward with respect to the size of one of an additional sign, being the matter before you tonight or this afternoon. That sign, when the sign variance committee took a look at that request, then the conditions were imposed in relation to that, which then requested the removal of one of the signs that had already been issued a permit. So again, that's what's before council.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions of staff? Okay, seeing none, does it make sense that we just work through the variances one by one, and then that way we're clear on what we're doing? I'm not sure the easiest way for us to look at those, whether the clerk, want to put the variances up, as separate items, or if we use, like, if I look at Natalie, if we use the delegates PowerPoint slide of the variance, would that cover it?
Yes, you can take a look at that slide. There's also in the conclusions of the staff report, it does identify the 3 different options. In addition, Appendix A of the staff report is the decision of the sign variance committee where the conditions are contained as well. So it's whatever's easiest.
Okay, I don't know, I don't seem to have Appendix A in my copy in front of me in the hard copy. So let me just. Yeah, it's missing from my package. You said it's page 17? Yeah, so I don't have it. Okay. As long as I'm not losing my mind entirely, it's a little bit helpful. I'm gonna look to the clerk. What's the easiest way? Do you want to bring up the staff report appendix, please?
Natalie, do you mind repeating which sections of the report we should go to?
Sure. It's section 5 of the staff report or Appendix A. So section 5 would provide the different options before council for consideration. And Appendix A, which is page 17 of 19 of the council meeting packet, includes Appendix A, which is the actual decision of the sign variance committee on this matter.
All right, so I've got it up now. So the first condition is signage area and location be shown on the plans attached to the decision. So I don't think there's any change to that, is there?
Just for clarification, the 3 conditions that are under appeal are condition number 2, condition number 3, and condition number 4.
Thank you very much. Okay. So item 2, that signage be equipped with a timer and the lighting be dimmed 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. daily. Is there anyone on council who would like to offer an alternative motion to change that decision of the council, of the committee? Okay, seeing none, we're going to now move on to item 3, which is that the applicant not erect any signage on the existing freestanding sign. Is there an interest around council? Mayor McCabe, did you want to move to allow the Goodwill sign to go on the freestanding sign?
Yes.
Okay, is there a seconder for that motion? It's seconded by Councillor Hanmer. Is there conversation on that, Councillor Vasek?
One of my thoughts is that I think what I really want to know is if No Frills will have space on that sign, if Goodwill gets space on that sign. And the reason I say that is because it's one of the only affordable grocery stores that will be in a big radius, and it's kind of tucked behind. So I would just want to confirm that No Frills would still have space on a freestanding sign to make it visible from King and Weber.
Through you, Chair Freeman, to Councillor Vasek, I'm not sure. Like there's 3 spaces on the freestanding sign at the northwest corner of the property, so there wouldn't be anything left over based on the proposal that was put forward for Goodwill. on that particular sign. The other sign that's right at the corner of, so the southwest corner of the property and at the intersection of King and Weber, I have not taken a full inventory to determine how much would be left over, if anything, for future tenants such as No Frills.
I just had a follow-on question to that one. I did see you, Mayor McCabe, if I could. My understanding is the two businesses that are listed there, in particular National Sport, they're out of business. So one would think that their sign is going to be removed from there, would it not?
Quite possibly.
Sorry,
Can we just see a picture of that again? I just
Yeah.
don't have it in my mind, that's all. Thanks.
for sure. Mayor McCabe.
Thank you, and through you, through you, Chair Freeman. Part of what I'm wondering is if that freestanding sign could, the property owner could just not redo that so that there's actually enough space in there, and they, they change the dimensions of the signs to allow space for all of the people who are leasing from them. And then, kind of everyone's happy.
Is there constraints on whether or not, how many numbers of businesses can go on a freestanding sign?
There are no permit requirements for freestanding signs, so no.
Okay, that's helpful information, thank you. Councillor Hanmer?
A question that, I believe that the wholesale club is also not there. Is that not where No Frills is going?
Through you, Chair Freeman, I'm not sure of the exact location of the No Frills with respect to previous tenants, but I see Mr. Cotter walking up, who is likely able to confirm the exact location.
Certainly, to assist council, the wholesale club will remain in its current location. The National Sports is being converted over to a No Frills. So on the fascia sign, there is currently a wholesale club signage. The National Sports signage would likely be replaced with the No Frills, leaving one panel available for another marketing opportunity, which in this case could be Goodwill.
Thank you.
Yep, Councillor Bodley.
Thank you, through your Chair Freeman. I just want to highlight for the rest of council, I'm not on the sign variance committee anymore, but I was in my previous term of council, and I wanted to highlight that I know that we're looking at these on individual bases, but I know that during the sign variance committee discussions, there are often sort of trade-offs. What if you did this, then maybe we could do this, or we could allow this sign if we didn't do this. And so I think without having been in that meeting, I could certainly see a scenario in which the sign variance committee said, we're going to allow you to have the sign to be X size so long as you are not on the freestanding sign, as an example. I'm not suggesting that that's what happened, but I think there are some, notwithstanding the process, some caution in looking at these in individually. And I just wanted to speak to, having been on that committee as well, how much time and how professional the folks who are on that committee are, and how much time they spend deliberating and discussing the merits of the application. So just broadly speaking, from my perspective, I fully trust the judgment of that committee and also the council representation that's on it today. So I just wanted to highlight that as some comments from a past committee member.
Yeah, I appreciate that, thank you. Was there any other questions on this? Councillor Roach?
Through you, Chair Freeman, I wholeheartedly agree with Councillor Bodley with regard to the amount of trade-offs that go on, and I really put a lot of faith in our committee members. Some of you who have been former planners here at Waterloo. I thought that during the presentation, some of the pictures were they were old, they weren't up to date, and strategically taken. I mean, I drive that every day, and I do donate to Goodwill. And I mean, the picture coming from on Weber towards King, that was maybe conveniently not shown because all you see is Goodwill. You see about 3 signs of Goodwill, and I do agree with the concerns that Councillor Vasek has, that we do have an affordable grocery store coming in next door, and there'll be very few signs. So I do believe that on that intersection, which I drive practically every day or walk every day, there is sufficient signage, and I think that that we may be it may be right to stand by the committee's decision. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. So I appreciate what everyone said. I think, though, that it is easiest for us just to look at them one by one. So is there any other commentary on this particular item? So can I have all in favor of the motion, which would effectively change the committee decision and would allow the applicant to have signage on the freestanding sign? I will provide quick commentary as the ward councillor. I think I'd prefer like a sign that to the white sign there, or just, and because we've asked for it to be dimmed, which I really do support, and I'm thankful for that, because I recognize there might not be residential directly across the street right now, but as we know, we have a ton of applications for mixed uses in that corner, so I'm very frustrated with the light pollution levels that we have in the city already, so I really do agree with the dimming. But I think that myself personally, I would support this particular motion because I would like this to, as opposed to a white sign, but that's just my sharing. So all those in favor of this particular piece? Okay, there's 3, 4, okay. Those contrary minded? There's 4 opposed, so that falls, and the committee decision is upheld. So the next item is item number 4, that the fascia sign S3 as shown on the plans attached be removed. So if I understand correctly, that's the large donation center sign that is above the canopy, where there's 3 donation center signs on the canopy. Is that correct, Natalie? Yeah. Yeah, okay, great. So is there anyone that would like to move an alternative motion to the committee decision on this matter? Seeing none, then we've done our work today. So we have effectively upheld the decision of the committee. I thank you, Mr. Noseworthy, for attending today and bringing this appeal to our attention, but the committee decision will stand. So we're moving on, and council, I just want to apologize. I was so caught up in taking extra time with our territorial acknowledgements today that I neglected to take a moment of reflection. So I hope that you don't mind if we just take a step back and do that, because I think it is important. Yes. Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right. Sorry, there is a motion on the sign variance appeal. And so it's to receive the report and that we issue a decision, and in this case, it's to uphold that of the sign variance committee. Is there someone willing to move that motion? It's clerk's choice. Everyone agreed to move it, and so I will choose Councillor Rowe and Councillor Roach, and all those in favor, and that's carried unanimously. Sorry, I'm just going to say that as we continue with this council meeting, I'd like us to take a quick pause to think about the needs of our community, and that we may show wisdom and compassion in all of our decisions. So thank you for letting me do that. So the next item on our agenda is the consent motion, and I would like to pull item C associated with the pedestrian crossings. Is there any other motion that anyone would like to pull from the consent motion? Seeing none, may I have a mover and seconder to approve all of the items in the consent motion except for item C? Moved by Councillor Bodley, seconded by Mayor McCabe. All those in favor? That's carried. So we're going on to items removed from the consent motion, and it's with regard to the pedestrian crossovers. So I just had a couple of questions for staff. I certainly support the motion, and I'm really pleased to see more of these devices coming along that support active transportation and our transportation goals, or our transportation master plan as it relates to supporting alternative modes of commuting. One of the PXOs is in Councillor Wright's ward, and it's at Necker Street. And there are some challenging sight lines for cars on Necker as they come up. Can you help me to understand how we address that with a PXO?
Sure, so through you, Chair. Every location that has been listed within the report still has to go through a detailed design. And so within that detailed design, we'll look at things like vegetation, sight lines, any type of additional measures that we might need to put in there. So it's not to say that every single one in this report is going to be 100% a go. We still need to go through that detail first.
And my second question was about the PXO near kids' ability. So this is a really, really important crossing in my ward and will become even more important when the new larger accessibility playground gets constructed. The two-stage crossing that uses the center median on Rim, near Rim Park, is really, really not working well. I probably get emails and concerns around that crossing every month. People stop me in public places and say, I almost hit a child yesterday because they didn't know they had to press the button twice, that they have to press it when they cross, and then they have to press it a second time in the island so they can continue for the second half. I would not be comfortable with a two-stage PXO on Davenport Road. And so I just want to put that on the table right now, and if we can change the one on University Avenue at Rim, that would be really very good. But I just want to make sure that we're looking at a single button situation at Davenport Road.
Just through you, Chair, if I can comment on that, we may have to take that offline in discussion. The Highway Traffic Act is pretty specific when it comes to crossing and having mid-block crossing and not having them as a singular stage. So we need to have a look at that and review if we can do it legally.
Is it ever happen where they use like a sensor, like what you use for bicycles, so that when they approach a crossing, then it would automatically censor and start the overhead PXO? So meaning if someone crossed at University Avenue, as soon as they crossed the accessibility plate or something near there, that it would automatically signal the second half? Is that ever possible?
Through you, Chair, it is possible, and it's something that we can look at. We also have identification signs at each of those to give people information as they're using it, but we also understand that not everybody looks at that. We're collaborating with the City of Kitchener right now too to do an informational, educational video, and we're hoping to have that broadcast widely as well to help educate all users of them. But I understand the complexity and sometimes confusion.
So how does signage like that work if someone has low or no vision?
Through you, Chair, we have actually put some of the signage through our accessibility committee and some of our staff, but that's something that we would ask them as well for their input.
Because those were my concerns on these PXOs, and I don't know if anyone else. Yeah, Councillor Rowe.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Jenny, for your work on this. I just wanted to bring up the Regina and the Hickory Street, which I had looked at prior to this. And I have the information that there is, sorry, I'm trying to get my thoughts together. It's a busy area with students. So I have had people reach out, as you know, concerned about crossing there with students. And it's categorized as a level 2D, which doesn't have the flashing lights. So can you just explain a little bit more about looking at the sites and what factors would go in to ensure that they're being considered, or that one specifically being considered for lights?
Sure, through you, Chair, to the councillor. The Ontario Traffic Manual Book 15 does a prescription about and guidance on what type and level should be at each location. Typically, or I guess the matrix within Book 15 is really posted speed and the volume, but that doesn't mean that we couldn't go above and beyond. That means that's a guideline and best practice. So when we do our detailed design, like we did for each one, we might look at those specifically. And so high pedestrian volumes may indicate that staff may recommend something above, but we want to be careful so that we don't set a precedent across the city.
Okay, thank you.
I saw Councillor Hanmer and then Councillor Bodley.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, my comment, Jenny, is more, and I think you know where I'm going to go with this, more of a comment, and it is unfortunately an area that we can't do anything about completely as a city, but I would like to encourage us to continue to work with the region in looking at improving the pedestrian safety in the roundabouts that are on our regional roads. As recent as Friday, there was another pedestrian hit at the roundabout at Ira Needles and Herb Street. So something does need to change, and this time it was not a senior, it was a younger person that was hit. So I do encourage us to continue looking at how we can improve the safety there as quickly as possible. Thank you.
I do have a comment on that. I do understand that the region is running a pilot on increasing the conspicuity of the flashing or additional flashing beacons as a pilot at roundabouts. I don't know where that stands. They've had massive staff turnover, but that was in the queue, and then we have it on our list to follow up with them.
Good. Thank you. I'd appreciate an update on that one, and any encouragement we can do, selfish reasons, between wards 1 and 2, it would be great to have that one fixed. Thank you.
I think you speak on behalf of the city, Councillor Hanmer. It's not just a ward issue. Sorry, Councillor.
I just wanted to add as a regional councillor, because that has been discussed on a number of occasions, that when it has come up, what we've been told, and I know it's more complex than just this, but that adding flashing lights directly at that roundabout probably wouldn't, at least their initial perspective on it is that it may not help at right exactly there because there's so much else going on there. Like there's the Tim Hortons and the drive-through, and there's is it Chuck's? There's a restaurant. Like there's already a lot of things happening there. So if it were to help, it would have to. They may need to move it further outside. That was sort of an initial thing. I just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you, Mayor. If I might, through that, my comment was make it safer, not how we make it safer.
Yeah, fair enough. I still despise the Tim Hortons and still stand by my vote to not approve it, but I lost that day. But I'll just say it one more time about how much I thought that was a terrible location for Tim Hortons. So Councillor Bodley and then Councillor Wright.
Thank you, through you, Chair Freeman. I appreciate a new word, conspicuity. I'll be sure to put that into my vocabulary. My question is about should those type D crossings, once you get into the nuts and bolts of implementing these things, should a crossing be implemented as a type D crossing because that's what the context of the day suggests? Does that preclude future warrants or future analysis of pedestrians to potentially look at converting it to a type B from a type D? Is that a challenge because we'll have spent the money to implement it as a type D, or is it actually easy to cross it over, and just what would that process maybe look like in the future? Because there's one in particular in Ward 2 that I wanted to highlight is proposed as a type D, and perhaps today's context suggests that that would be true, but it's going next to a dog park that will be built in the future, and it's next to a host of new development that is where the children are currently being asked to cross Columbia Street. And so I think as those things roll out, we might see a change in the context. So I'd like you to speak to what that might look like in the future.
Sure, absolutely. Through you, Chair, to the Councillor Bodley. There is always an opportunity to enhance these as we go along. It's part of our annual screening that we do, and these locations, as like every other type of traffic control in the city, the traffic engineering office, we do an annual scan of everything. So we collect data and we review things, and so it's definitely not out of the question for us to be able to either enhance something as we go.
Excellent, thank you.
Councillor Wright.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. So I'm just wondering if you can provide a little bit of clarity. On the Spur Line Trail, we already have a crossing at Regina in the Spur Line. And then what's proposed here is Allen Street in the Spur Line, which is basically right at Mary Ellen Park. And then we basically have two streets that then don't have any kind of crossing. That's John Street and the spur line, as well as William Street. Is that William that comes along and then becomes Willow? Willow or William? No, it's William. Curves around behind here. So I'm just wondering, residents often ask about the consistency in terms of the multi-use trail crossings and having clear rules and signage so that every trail user and road user understands what's expected. At that Willow intersection there, there's a high number of young people who use that as a commuting route to school. And so the trail is actually extremely well used there. And so I'm just curious why, if that will be part of a future phased plan by the city, and just understanding the kind of timing and prioritization of these, of the PXO implementation. Thanks.
Through the chair to Councillor Wright, it is it's the Transportation Office intent to prioritize these locations based on the Transportation Master Plan, the priority network, and the Spurline Trail is one of those networks. And so eventually, I would suggest that majority of the crossings along the Spurline will have the PXOs. What we're putting in front of you today are those that rose to the top based on the conditions and criteria that we have.
Yeah, thanks for that. Mayor McCabe.
Thank you, and I know there's, sounds like no end to the areas that need traffic calming and drivers slowed down. But I was, in my experience, I think we also need to look at there's already like a partially protected crosswalk on Phillips, just a little bit, a few meters along, well, maybe 50 meters up from University Avenue, right, Phillips Street. So many pedestrians there, and I just think that's one. There already is an island in that for people, but it's dark. I was just on there on Saturday night, and there's so many students walking back and forth there. I just really think that should be an area that's really prioritized as well. And my other, and so if I'll leave that with you, but part of one of the other thing, a question that came to me just based on something you said, Jenny, was about being careful not to set a precedence. And I'm like, set a precedence about what? Being overly, like, putting too many of these across the city? Or I'm just curious about what you meant by what kind of precedence we need to be careful setting.
Through you, Chair, to Mayor McCabe. Setting a precedence, what I meant by that was putting flashing lights everywhere at all of them. Right now I have a list out of over 100 locations, and that's just what we found so far and what we're working through. There could be more within the city, and to say that every single location would have rapid flashing beacons may not be the proper or appropriate facility. I'm also very conscious of putting anything flashing in a neighborhood. We could put shields around them, but we may not want shields, and it could be in someone's front window in the middle of the night flashing. So we're trying to put the appropriate measure in that place so that we're being fair and consistent across the city. Is that?
Yeah, no, that's helpful. I guess it just underscores the need for people to slow down, and that for our community to be designed that way. And I think it also underscores the need for, the direction we're going with reducing speed across in the areas where we can. Because it is, it's a challenge across the whole city.
Yep, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'm glad I pulled it. Clearly, I wasn't the only one who wanted to talk about this. Mover for the motion, Councillor Bodley, seconded by Councillor Hanmer. All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jenny. I really appreciate your willingness to be here today. In terms of items removed, staff reports, the first one is staff report 9A. Brad, there's no presentation on this one, so it's, there was a fair bit of information in the packet associated with the surplus and deficit projections. Was there any questions of staff, Council? Councilor Wright.
I just have through you, Chair, I just have a couple of questions that are clarification. So when I was reading through and I was looking at stormwater and water revenue, am I on the right one? Yeah, I think I am, because we were talking about surplus and deficit. Okay. I just wanted to, this just piqued my curiosity more than anything. So it appears that in wet years, we have more volume of stormwater, and therefore it's more expensive to process that stormwater. And last year's surplus, I'm just making an assumption here that we were in drought conditions, and so there wasn't the excess of stormwater to deal with. And on the flip side, in the water portfolio, our revenue is up. And so there's no restrictions on water use because of drought conditions, therefore people are using more water. I'm just trying to get some clarification on that.
Through you, Chair Freeman, to Councillor Wright. I'll just start with beginning to say that projections on water and sanitary are a little bit more difficult than they are on stormwater. As with our stormwater, it's a fixed base fee, and we're pretty accurate in our customer base. And then obviously on water and sanitary, it is volumetric, and it does fluctuate year over year. However, the wet conditions can be twofold. We can see a declining in revenue from a city perspective, as there may be not as much water usage. And then we also could see some increased expenditures on the sanitary side. But the water use restrictions that would continue to be in place in accordance with regional bylaws. So the accuracy here is pretty accurate when you look at the magnitude of the enterprises, but we were trending to a slight surplus. But I'll just preface that this is based on actuals as of the end of July, and so we did see some pressures with August data that's now come in, and so these numbers could fluctuate before year end. But any surplus or deficit from water and sanitary would be contributed or are funded by the rate stability reserve.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
Any other questions of staff? Seeing none, there's a recommendation here for council's consideration. Do I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Bassick, seconded by Councillor Roach. All those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay. So the next one is with regard to the Waterloo Region Economic Development Corporation, WREDC. We don't have a presentation, but I note that Mr. Lamantia is here with us today if council has any questions on this report that his insight is required. Obviously, our CAO's office prepared this report, so they're available to answer any questions as well. Justin's in the hot seat. Councillor Bassick.
Thanks for the report. I just wanted to note one thing, and then I do have one question. Just a note that I've shared with staff as well, that this is yet another example of downloaded cost to municipalities, when clearly this has a much broader economic impact for the entire country. As the report states, it's delivered in excess of 1.55 billion in GDP, 12,500 new jobs, and almost 118 million in additional taxes to the Canadian ecosystem between 2016 and 2022. Also a big local impact. So there's no reason why I see not supporting this. Just to note that that's one of many other downloaded costs. And then my question is probably for Tim, maybe for Justin. Tim's just already answered this by email, so might be Tim. What I was interested in when I saw this was that we'd be committing to funding these annual increases, the increase in total, but also plus CPI in each subsequent year. And I was surprised to see that because I haven't seen that come forward much otherwise. So I'm curious if we typically do that for other things that we support. What came to mind was the $100,000 a year affordable housing allocation, where we're just doing $100,000, we're not doing plus CPI. So I was curious to see that. If you could tell me a little bit more about why we're doing that in this case, if we do it in others, and if we don't, should we be considering doing it for other things as well?
Through you, Chair Freeman, to Councillor Vasek's question. Yeah, no, thank you for that. In talking this one through with the finance staff a little bit, we are not consistent on CPI across the board in all agreements. And in this particular case with WREDC, this is the first time we're introducing the CPI escalation. Again, it's just kind of recognizing the operation challenges that this organization and others have on an annual basis with increased costs. So it's not a new kind of thought process with other agreements. I know we do have it in place, just not consistently across the board in the case of all agreements in Waterloo. But I think it is a growing trend. I think from a sustainability perspective, we're seeing organizations looking for that extra help on an annual basis. Yep. Thank you.
And Councillor Bodley. Sorry, Councillor Vasek, did you have another question? Okay, thank you, Councillor Vasek, or Bodley.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, through you, Chair Freeman. I might piggyback on something that Councillor Vasek alluded to, and maybe ask it in the form of a question. So, in the report, and this might be for Tony actually, in the report it references that the sustainability of federal and provincial funding programs is waning, and perhaps without getting into the specificity of what that means, or maybe if you would like getting into the specificity of that, I'm wondering if you could speak to why or what exactly that means when it's suggested that federal and provincial support is waning.
Through you, Chair, Freeman to Councillor Bodley.
You can raise the podium there, Tony. There's a thing on the side, and that'll make it a little bit easier for the rest of us to hear you.
Oh, there we go.
Thank you.
I actually have a desk like this, so no excuse. So let me start by saying that our core funding from our 8 municipal partners covers what I call the meat and potatoes part of the operation. You know, it covers salaries, facilities, operating expenses. Federal and provincial support, which started in about 2018, only covers specific program costs. So they won't cover, you know, bums and seats. They won't cover specific expenditures, rent. And in the case of FedDev Ontario, they've been a terrific partner over the last 5 years. That agreement is concluding. We actually have had to reapply on a new project. So we're definitely treated uniquely, and I think it's part of the fact that the federal government looks at all expenditures to regions and cities across Canada, and they would argue that, you know, Waterloo Region is well treated by the federal government. And so we basically have to go forward with a new project that has a laid out set of criteria and return on investment, and there's actually no guarantee that that gets funded. In the case of the province of Ontario, we have had to go every single year with essentially a range of targets and asks that are used primarily to fund our marketing practice. So marketing Waterloo Region is a proposition that requires a committed effort, a sustained effort internationally, and you know, we wouldn't have been able to do any of our investment marketing without the provincial support. The province would say, and we had Vic Videlli in the community on August the 31st at a Bosch announcement, that there are very few communities that get provincial support for what you do. So they named Toronto. Toronto Global does receive provincial support. And then Waterloo EDC, which is our operating name, is also one of those communities, as is Invest Ottawa. I would argue that, you know, we don't have the same political influence that Toronto does, and so we have to actually sometimes bend like pretzels to demonstrate the value that we bring, the return on investment. We have a great relationship with the federal and provincial governments, but that funding is not only is it not guaranteed, it's a much smaller pot these days, and so that's the challenge we have. So it's really about scarce resources and trying to make the case that Waterloo Region and our organization in particular is a deserving partner. So hopefully that helps.
Sure.
Thank you. Just to follow up through Chair Freeman, is the suggestion that, or can you confirm, I guess, is WREDC going to continue to apply to these programs and still working with those partners? It's just that there's a concern about the landscape of that, and you're looking for more stable funding and a new deal with the municipalities here to justify the operations. Is that fair to contextualize?
Yeah, through Chair Freeman to you, Councillor Bodley, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Mayor McCabe.
Since Tony's been here, thank you, through you, Chair Freeman, and since Tony's here, and him and I had met just earlier today, and he had shared their new strategic plan. And I just thought, since you're here, maybe you could brag a little bit about some of the return on investment. Tell us a little bit about the return on investment, what we've received from the city of Waterloo as well as the region of Waterloo, but particularly the city, for the investment that we have made and that you're asking us to make. If you could maybe talk about some of the successes that you've had.
Happy to do that, Your Worship, and through you, Chair Freeman. I'm going to do this off the top of my head because I have the strat plan on my chair because I thought I was just coming up for the one question. But what I will say is that it's hot off the press, and there are copies for the rest of council should councillors be interested in receiving it. It was literally posted on the website this morning. So since inception, the city of Waterloo has, I can give you the general number, but because year to date there are a couple of fairly significant dollar amounts that are not in the public domain yet, they will be, but roughly 240 million in inward investment into the city since our inception, which is terrific. And so you take that, you divide it by the 320,000 that's been contributed yearly, and you get a return of investment that's about $96 for every dollar invested. So we're really proud about that. I'd like to think that a win in the city of Waterloo is great for Kitchener and is also great for Cambridge, and that's the philosophy. When we go to different councils, there are some councils, we have a township that doesn't have any wins, but they benefit from the investment going into the community. So that's one piece that we're particularly proud of. And I'd say the other piece is maybe to extend some of the insight in Councillor Vasich's comments. We are provincially, a very significant part of southwestern Ontario. We are a globally significant brain belt, a globally significant center for advanced manufacturing, and the federal government and the provincial government recognize that, but they don't always match that with support for us to continue. I think that operationally we've run a very tight ship. Our funding has been flat for 8 years. And, the reason why this renewal is so important is because, let's turn back the clock. In 2016, the board was busy hiring a CEO, and we started kind of building up the operation with payroll and IT. It was essentially a startup. From 2018, it became a scale-up with federal and provincial support, if I could use that analogy. And now as we mature and really kind of move it to the next level, I think that it does make sense to look at the population growth, the big action in the region on a number of fronts, and get the funding to a level that's more sustainable. We're still going to need federal and provincial support, but the highlights in the strat plan include the focus on shovel-ready land in the region. That's a big deal. And we're going to be working very closely on the west side lands for the city of Waterloo and Generation Park. That's a very exciting opportunity, and our role is essentially to fill this great, prospective space that the taxpayers have funded with companies that are kind of deserving, and they're going to be contributors to the ecosystem. So we're going to be very picky about how we market that. And you know, I think that the promise of the strat plan is we think we could get to 2.4 billion. We're confident we're going to land a transformational investment in the community, you know, and we've been doing some work with the region of Waterloo on the inventory of strategic sites. I think the region is going to have its work done by the end of the year, but I'm very excited about that. And so, you know, there's obviously a little bit of bragging we do in these strat plan because they're public marketing documents. But I'm, you know, given my time at the province and my time in the private sector, I think it's also very important to reflect on kind of what it's taken to get here, right? And we've built a collaboration blueprint. You know, the city of Waterloo has been a natural partner, and you know, I won't hide the fact that the city was a key part of the HR committee, and so you know, whenever I come to City Hall, there's always an office for me that I can use, and I'm really, you know, grateful for that partnership. But if there are any specific questions about our commitment to sustainability or some of the clean tech investments we've been able to land, there's one thing I want to brag about that I think this council should keep in their, you know, your bag of anecdotes, and that is we were able to land during the pandemic a gaming studio company in the region. It's the region's first. It's called Odyssey Interactive. There's a gentleman named Richard Henkel who is a University of Waterloo graduate. He made his reputation and probably, you know, built his professional career on a game called League of Legends. So I'm not a gamer. My son-in-law is, and there's a company called Riot Games in Los Angeles. And when I told him we landed the company, he was like, "Holy, you guys landed, you know, this guy, he's a genius. He's going to do all kinds of great things." He wasn't my son-in-law yet, and I'm thinking, do I really want this guy to marry my daughter, right? But having said that, they've continued to grow. They've raised a, you know, significant amount of money, and they represent the region's first actual, you know, gaming studio. They released their first production a few months ago. It's called Mega Strikers. I'm not a gamer. It's something that you play on your mobile phone. They have 4 million players worldwide, mostly in the U.S. and Japan. As I learned more about the gaming industry, I didn't realize that stadiums are full of people watching other people play video games. So it's a world I really don't understand. But what I do know, given my experience at the province working with Ubisoft and landing Ubisoft, is that the benefits to Sheridan College and the ecosystem were tremendous. So my hope is that Odyssey becomes an anchor company driving some of the interactive digital media work going on at Conestoga College, getting some talent coming into the community, and just growing our reputation as a future hub for gaming and interactive digital media. So that's one thing that's City of Waterloo centric. I think, you know, that the council should boast about, because it's a great story for the region. You know, hopefully we'll have more of those anecdotes to share in the months and years ahead, but that's one of the things I'm very happy to report on today. It's not in the strat plan, but maybe at some point you might want to get Richard Henkel here just to give an update, because he's quite the rock star. I had him at the Communitech Hub for 200 students from a racialized part of Toronto that were doing a tour, and they were asking for his autograph, and it was quite something to see. So he's here, and he made the decision to leave Los Angeles and start his company in the city of Waterloo.
That's great. Thank you for the update.
Okay.
So we have a recommendation on the table, Council. Is there someone interested to move that recommendation? Moved by Mayor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Roach. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. So we're now moving on to consideration of notice of motion given at previous meetings. It's related to guaranteed livable basic income, and it's a motion by Councillor Vasek. Councillor, is it okay if we move to the delegations first and then we'll address your motion? I understand that I don't need to have you read it in because it's part of the package. And we're not waiving notice of motion, so people have had time to read it. So with that being said, I'm happy to welcome our delegations on this. I understand that you'll be speaking kind of one after the other together. So there's Beatrix Henry, Lorna Aberdeen, and Colleen Cooper, and they're all residents of the city of Waterloo, and so welcome. I'll let you approach the podium.
Sorry. Will I process the slides or will you do that?
I think we can do it either way. If you would like to press the down button, I think that you'll be able to advance the slides.
That one?
Yeah.
Yeah, just that one, okay. Okay,
And can I just trouble you to speak right directly into the microphone? It just makes it a little easier for me to hear and maybe also the folks that are on listening online. So thank you very much.
okay. Madam Chair, Mayor McCabe, and Council. My name is B. Henry and I'm a resident of Waterloo. Thank you for allowing us to present some information about why a guaranteed livable basic income is so needed at this time. We'll share with you our research on why it is needed, essential, doable, and affordable. This is the definition of a basic income as it comes from Coalition Canada, a group of activists from across Canada who are working to convince politicians that a basic income is an essential pillar in a just recovery from the COVID pandemic. A basic income is a direct payment from government to ensure that everyone has sufficient income to meet basic needs, participate in society, and live with dignity regardless of work status. We're talking today about a basic income guaranteed, or as it is sometimes called, a livable guaranteed basic income, and not about a universal basic income. With the basic income guarantee, only those whose income falls below a specific threshold would receive the money. The amount of the basic income would decrease as other income increases. There are, of course, lots of details that would have to be decided when a basic income is implemented. For example, how much the amount would be and how much it would be reduced as a person's other income increases. Here are some of the reasons that a guaranteed livable basic income is so needed. These bullets are all either indicators of how people fall into poverty or the consequences of living in poverty. They are not new to us. Recent statistics indicate that we have a serious problem in our country and one for which a basic income could be at least part of the solution. Food insecurity is increasing. The most recent data from the region of Waterloo Food Bank stated that there were 46,000 visits to the food bank in August of 2023, and that is up 35% from August 2022. This shows that people living in our area who are making only the minimum wage are trying to live on an income that is 25% less than what's been calculated to be a living wage. This helps to explain why people who have jobs are visiting the food banks at an increasing rate. They can't cover their basic needs on the income they're making. The increase to the minimum wage as of October 1st will be welcomed, but it will not erase this gap. 1 in 5 children live with food insecurity. Nearly a third of Canadians say they don't make enough money to pay their bills and debts. 46% of Canadians report that they make $200 a month more than their monthly financial obligations. And 52% of Canadians feel they don't have enough money left at the end of the month to save for their retirement. All of this in the midst of plenty. As Coalition Canada said in its report to the Standing Committee on Finance, by tying benefits to conditions such as employment rather than to income, our current social safety net fails to provide adequate support to many Canadians. Employed individuals make up the majority of those living in poverty. about 54%, indicating that participation in the labor market is not enough to lift millions of Canadians out of poverty. This slide shows the considerable difference between what people on Ontario Works and ODSP receive per month and the poverty line compared to the poverty line as defined by the market basket measure. And it also shows the amount that individuals received in 2018 when the Ontario Basic Income Pilot was implemented, and that amount was also below the poverty line, but was considerably more adequate than the social assistance rates. This slide shows a similar situation for a two-parent family with 2 children under 6. The perfect storm of inflation and high prices is driving more people into homelessness. From the comfort of our own homes, it's hard to understand the complexities of poverty and homelessness, but we know that both impact us all. These are only some of the most pressing reasons why a guaranteed livable basic income is needed now more than ever. And I'll now pass it on to Lorna to talk about why it is essential to implement a basic income. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Lorna Aberdeen, and our group, Basic Income Waterloo Region, believes a basic income is essential and doable. These are photos by Jesse Gollum for a photo exhibit called Humans of Basic Income. These images tell stories of people that participated in the Ontario Basic Income Pilot Project. The caption for the photo on the left reads, "The Basic Income Program helped us move to a better apartment in a safer neighborhood and feel financially secure enough to go back to school to get a better job." A basic income allows people to participate in the economy and safely live and thrive in their communities. It reduces the financial burden of legal, health, and social services. It reduces homelessness. The Ontario Basic Income Pilot demonstrated improvement in the lives of the participants. Some recent statistics that, in my view, indicate we have a serious problem in this province, and one for which a basic income could be at least part of the solution. For example, between January 2022 and September 2022, the number of people accessing food banks in Ontario increased 24% over the previous year, with 1 in 3 people being first-time visitors. In Toronto, 1/3 of people coming to food banks in 2022 worked full-time, up from about 16% the year before. In Waterloo Region, the number of unique households accessing food assistance increased 57% between January and March 2023 compared to the same quarter in 2022. Stats Canada data showed that the wealthiest 20% of households controlled nearly 68% of the total net worth in Canada in the first quarter of 2023, while the least wealthy 40% accounted for 2.7%. This data, compiled by the Parliamentary Budget Office, shows family net wealth distribution by selected percentiles in Canada for 2019. It illustrates that the top 1% have almost the same amount of wealth as 80% of the population. Basic income decreases costs for legal, health, and social services. One main area of savings is in healthcare. Poverty is a key determinant of health. As we reduce poverty, health improves, which means that healthcare costs would decrease. There would be less mental illness, fewer emergency room visits, and overall better health. This not only makes intuitive sense, it was also shown in the Ontario Basic Income Pilot results. Another area of savings is in policing and correction costs. 80% of crime is related to poverty. And a basic income would vastly reduce the need for food banks and homeless shelters. More recent qualitative data from the prematurely cancelled Ontario Basic Income Pilot indicated reductions in post-traumatic stress and chronic health problems, with almost 80% reporting improved general health. Mental health status is an important component of healthcare costs. The MinCom experiment in Manitoba in the late 1970s showed an 8.5% decline in hospitalization rates, largely due to a decline in mental health issues related to alcohol consumption. Oops, sorry, I missed a slide. So basic income improves lives in so many ways, as you can see by the little bullets at the top there. It gives them a firm floor to stand on. And a basic income is doable. It can be delivered efficiently, securely, and economically. Government's swift action in 2020 resulted in a substantial decrease in Canada's overall poverty rate. Federal emergency and recovery benefits mitigated the pandemic's impact for lower income populations. And I want to end with a quote from the late Hugh Segal. "The wrong approach is to ignore the problem, letting the ideological conceit that a rising tide lifts all boats obscure the hard reality that many Canadians have no boat or access to anyone who has ever had a boat." Thank you.
Hello, I'm Colleen Cooper from Waterloo, Ontario. And I'm going to talk now about the fact that basic income is affordable, because that's often the comments that we get. Well, this all sounds great, but how can we afford to do this? It has been calculated by people who have a lot more economic acumen than I do, that the cost for a national basic income plan is estimated to be approximately $81 billion a year. And that sounds like a really huge number and may seem like, well, how is that even possible for our country to come up with that? And that these costs would be, of course, ongoing and would continue to be part of the program each year. However, we know that there's about 6 different components of ways that we could generate the income that would cover this huge cost. There are 6 strategies. The first one is implement an annual wealth tax on the ultra-rich. So many statistics were presented today about, that top 2% or whatever of people who control a lot of the wealth. And those households with wealth over 20 million, which includes the top 1/10 or 1% of the households in Canada, if we taxed those in a more efficient way, could yield $70 billion in new tax revenue over 10 years, or $900 million annually. Strategy number 2 is to implement an increase in marginal federal income tax rate for high income earners only. So what this slide is showing is that anyone who makes $214,000 or less in income would not be affected at all by the changes to the Income Tax Act. So that it's only high earners that are going to pay a little bit more of their share. So with all of these 6 different strategies, what we're really talking about here are policy pieces and things that can be implemented to really help generate these funds. The third strategy is to increase corporate taxes for large corporations. And we're hearing a little bit about this now of some of the, the car people are in the news right now, and the grocery stores are in the news, and they're making these record profits while many, many Canadians are suffering in a big way. So in 2010, the corporate tax rate was 18%, and then it was reduced to 15%. So one way to close this loophole would be to reinstate those higher tax rates for large corporations. This would generate $6.2 billion in the first year. So as you can see, we're getting places to get this $8.2 billion from. The other strategy could be to implement an excess profits tax of 50%. And this could generate $8 billion in new tax revenue. So again, I think these are things that we might be hearing about now, just as people are talking more about some of the big profits that are out there. A fourth strategy would be to tackle the web giants. So right now, a lot of the, we all know people buy lots of stuff on Amazon and order from all these different online places, but those revenues don't get taxed in Canada. They stay in the United States or wherever other country these businesses are based. So if we looked at trying to harness some of the tax revenue from all these mega sales, that could also generate new money for us. So implement a 3% tax on web giant sales that do not currently pay corporate taxes on profits derived from business in Canada. This could generate another $600 million annually and rise over time. Tax Canadian spending on foreign digital media. Ensure equitable laws and policies for all web providers. A fifth strategy is to reduce tax havens. So again, I don't know all the details about tax havens, but we all know that they exist. And so what are some ways that we can help to crack down on some of these offshore kinds of things and help generate more revenue here in Canada? Close some of our tax loopholes. So capital gains is another thing that we could increase from 50% to 75%. Again, prior to the year 2000, capital gains were taxed at 75%. That was reduced. Perhaps that's another way to generate some more revenue. Stock options. This can be another loophole. And over 90% of this loophole are benefiting the top 1%, again, of those earners out there. So this might be another way to help generate some funds. And this one I find a little bit amusing at the end, you know, the business entertainment expenses. Eliminate deductions for entertaining expenses for large corporations. And there would be an exception for small and self-employed enterprises. But another argument that people often give us is that, oh, well, when you give people money, you know, there's abuse and, you know, people misuse the funds and things like that. So I think it's really interesting that a distinguished Osgoode Hall tax law professor once quipped about this loophole of business entertainment expenses. There's more tax fraud taking place at one Blue Jays game than all the welfare fraud in Ontario in a whole year. So let's really take a look at some of our policies and see how they could benefit the average person. So this is just a chart that sort of shows the 6 strategies on the left and the potential that they could, the potential amounts of revenue that they could generate. But the one on the far right, the thing that is important in all of this too is that Public Health Ontario has estimated savings in the region of $21.5 billion annually, preventing primary risk factors for chronic disease if we could eliminate poverty. So again, I know it's been mentioned before, but the savings to healthcare costs would be many, and not just the financial costs, but people living happier, more fulfilled, calm lives. I mean, you can't really put a price tag on that. And so in summary, a basic income is needed, essential, doable, and affordable to ensure that everyone has sufficient income to meet their basic needs, participate in society, contribute to the economy, and live with dignity. The most important question we can usefully answer in rich countries is not how to make them grow richer, but how to improve the quality of the life of the average citizen. It may be one of the greatest challenges for our time. We have the resources. And here's ways to get more information if you're interested. So thank you very much for listening to our presentations today.
Thank you very much for your time and sharing the information that you shared. With that, I'm going to turn over this motion to Councillor Vasek and see if she would like to move it with a comment or...
Yes, I would definitely like to move it. I'm also wondering if you can just go back to that last slide. Do you want me to move? And I have speaking notes here too. But before I get to them, I just wanted to note, it's just so, thank you. What a great presentation. And how this exactly captures the tension I feel between the Waterloo Region Economic Development Corporation presentation coming before this. And this is not a slight to them or to our own economic development team, but the world reveres economic development, and economic development is important for cities. I wouldn't say any differently, but that is taken for granted. And as we get richer and we celebrate industry coming in more, we're also leaving people behind. And economic development, while it can support individual citizens, of course, that isn't its intention. It just, anyways, it helps the wealthy get wealthier on a broader scale. But still, love our economic development team. So hope that that's clear. So I will move it, and I'll say the remarks that I wrote on the weekend, because I'm not good on off the cuff. Okay, so it's a couple weeks ago before school started, if you can believe it's only been a couple of weeks. I was working in the basement. Well, it was my partner's turn to do the parenting. Other kids at daycare, the older kid and him come home from grocery shopping, and I hear my kid say, "Why do we even have to pay for groceries? If I were president..." And rest assured, we have told him many times that there is a prime minister in Canada, but, but until his teacher tells him the same, he won't believe us. So he said, if I were president, everyone would eat for free. Adorable, yes. Naive, possibly. But at the core, what he's saying is that we are all inherently and unconditionally worthy of having our basic needs met. And that's exactly what a guaranteed livable basic income is meant to do. By providing an income-tested income top-up to those who need it, more people are able to eat, as we saw in the presentation, as well as put and keep a roof over their heads. Basic income prevents people from falling into poverty, which is good news because poverty has substantial individual and societal consequences. But the benefits of basic income, along with increasing OW and ODSP rates, which this motion also advocates for, and the value of collective responsibilities, putting these benefits into place have notable impacts. As the delegates talked about, there are costs, of course, to administering a program, but there are ways to recover those costs, and there can be cost savings as well. As one example, some of you might have seen the recent article about research out of UBC, where they gave $7,500 to 50 people who were homeless for the past 2 years, and among other benefits that this amount of money provided, it reduced shelter stays, which saved $8,277 per recipient, or a net of $777. Recent modeling, you had the great public health information from Ontario, which is great. The Positive News, which is I don't know if you've ever seen Positive News, but it's just a bunch of good news stories that they collect, recently published a little bit about recent modeling out of the National Health Service in the UK, which said that giving £75, or the equivalent of 125 Canadian dollars, per week, could prevent up to 1 million cases of depression annually, plus up to 1 million more physical health symptoms, which could save the health service billions. And like you said, it's about the cost savings, but isn't it just nice to think that millions less would have depression and significant health symptoms? There's lots of individual and community benefits, like the delegates have noted, so I don't want to just list those. But, you know, decreased hospitalizations, improved mental health, improved physical and mental health, and those come from the studies from the Mincome experiment in the 1970s, Manitoba, and from the one-year pilot in Brantford, Hamilton, Brant County. It makes sense for us as a municipality. It would save costs associated with homelessness and underhousing, social isolation, and alleviate mounting pressures, financial and social pressures that have been downloaded to municipalities where we only have two main sources of income. For some context, I got some information from staff, and annually the city invests close to $2.4 million in direct recreation subsidy programs that are generally oversubscribed. And between 2018 to 2022, the city has contributed $1.93 million, or an average of $385,000, and I'm sure that number is just going to keep growing towards direct affordable housing and initiatives. And while I'm not saying a basic income would result in a tax increase to Waterloo tax payers because of cost savings related to these subsidies, it may allow cities to shift their finances to address other pressing needs. Politically, there's benefits for us too, and I'm almost done, so don't worry. The public supports this overwhelmingly. Ontarians already value social benefits like OHIP, Old Age Security, and the Canada Child Benefit. Personally, I, surprisingly, as a city councillor, don't make a lucrative enough salary to not get the Canada Child Benefit, so thanks for that, Canada. It's also lifted nearly 435,000 children out of poverty within its first 4 years of implementation. An Angus Reid report, which council saw because someone sent this to us, demonstrated that in 2020, the majority of Canadians, at 59%, support a basic annual income of $30,000 per person, which is actually quite a high number given the pilot was substantially lower at $17,000 for an individual person. And since this motion went public, I've had a few dozen people reach out to me in support and only one not in favor. So I think it's time to give a no strings attached basic income program a proper go with a fulsome evaluation and alongside an increase to OW and ODSP, which is also way too low, as what great slides they showed us. So people can survive amidst an ever-increasing cost of living, and more than that, so that individuals and communities can thrive. A basic income is anything but basic. Done.
Thank you, Councillor Bassick. Is there a seconder for the motion? Seconded by Councillor Bodley. Is there more comments that people wanted to provide? Councillor Bodley?
Excuse me. Thank you through you, Chair Freeman. I wanted to thank the Basic Income Waterloo Region folks for their really great presentation and for their advocacy throughout the region. I know I had some folks from my ward reach out directly to me, and I had a meeting with them that was really great. It's great to see that there are folks in the community that care about this stuff. I just wanted to speak a little bit to income inequality in a little bit more detail. We know that per the presentation that was provided today that it's worsening across Canada, including in Waterloo Region. And although Councillor Bassick has some tension with economic growth, high income inequality actually diminishes economic growth in our community as well. And the main mechanism through which inequality affects growth is because it undermines educational opportunities for children from poor socioeconomic backgrounds, it limits social mobility, it hampers skills development. And we also know that income inequality undermines social cohesion in our communities, and that municipalities like ourselves are on the front line of the multiple crises that emerge from these income inequality issues which were addressed, whether those are economic development or mental health or housing and homelessness, etc. And one of the things, as I was looking into this more, that I think is intuitive but interesting to verbalize is that higher income inequality actually makes it more difficult to move outside of the income class that you were born into. And that is really counter to the meritocracy that we sometimes like to think exists in our society. And I would argue that, or the data shows that since 1994, the redistribution effect that federal and provincial governments are supposed to have as represented in income inequality tools has dropped significantly, and that's why we see some of the income inequality statistics that were shared with us today. And the restructuring of many government programs, such as employment insurance, has led to a smaller share of unemployed people getting unemployment benefits. And actually, welfare incomes have fallen since 1994. And as Councillor Vasic noted, and I won't reiterate, but basic income has been successful in the many pilots, and from my perspective, in my opinion, it is time for the federal and provincial government to establish a new government transfer to try and tackle some of these myriad issues that emerge from the problem of income inequality. And I appreciate, really happy to second the motion and appreciate Councillor Vasic putting it forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, through you, Chair. And I would also like to echo thanks to the delegates this afternoon. We're not even in the evening yet. For sharing your presentation with us. Since 2015, I've been working pretty heavily on the Sustainable Development Goals. And because the Sustainable Development Goals are also something that we care about deeply in the Waterloo and in the city of Waterloo, and we care about how we localize those goals. I think it's important at this point to just point out that the basic income proposal that's been shared with us by Councillor Vasic does align with goal number 1, no poverty. It aligns with goal number 10, reduced inequality. It aligns with goal 3, good health and well-being. And it aligns with goal 11, sustainable communities and cities. And there is definitely a case for local leadership from the city of Waterloo on this particular motion. I know that in the presentations, a lot of information was shared about the national position on this, but I think it's really important to also note the anti-poverty work that has been undertaken by Tamarack Institute over the last 20 and more years, and also the role that has been played by the Canadian Index of Wellbeing, which is housed at the University of Waterloo and was initially funded by the Atkinson Foundation, again aimed at lowering poverty in Canada and providing the data to support the approaches, the policy approaches that should be undertaken by the federal government. So you can see that there's a very strong link with local leadership, a Born in Waterloo approach. And lastly, I just want to point to the complexity of the financial lives of people who are living with reduced incomes. And it's notable that the JPAL lab at MIT won a Nobel Prize in 2019. So that's Esther Duflo and her partner. And the work that they did was to identify that it's local interventions that have the greatest impact on social problems, and that it's partnership that leads us to the solutions to the inequality that is persistent when you are someone with low income. And so I'd really like to support leadership from the city of Waterloo on this file. Thanks.
Thank you. And Councillor Hanmer.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to jump on a few of the comments that Councillor Wright has made, and thank you for bringing the SDGs into the fore here. Thank you to Councillor Vasic for putting this motion forward, and I think it's one that is well in its time. And thank you also to the delegation for adding some color and some solutions that can go forward with the work that we've done today. We do, as a city, take a lot of leadership, and I think kudos to our staff and the neighborhood strategies that we've started to put in place, which are small ways of showing local heroes and local leaders being able to take this initiative forward. And if we don't start now and begin to work together, we could be having this conversation for years and years and years and years. So I'm glad to see it before us, and I'm happy to be supporting the motion as it's written. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other comments? Mayor McCabe.
Yeah, thank you, through you, Chair, and I echo the very eloquent comments that my council colleagues made, and thank you very much for your presentation and the time and energy that you're putting into this issue, because it really, truly is important. And just to add to some of the comments that people made about the city. I just want to, again, thank Philippa and her team for leading the city and working with the United Way to advance the city as at the champion level of an organization with a living wage. So again, just wanted to thank you for that. I think that's really great and important that particularly public sector organizations like municipalities show that kind of leadership. And just also to remind us all about, there are things that municipalities can do directly to impact the affordability of life for residents. And a lot of that, I think, is caught up in questions of urban design and how we build our community. And of course, neighborhood strategy and things like that are important, but particularly with the densification and building communities where, we ensure that they're more walkable, there's access to things people need more within their own communities, so they don't, maybe necessarily have to have a vehicle, which we know contributes greatly to the expenses. They can access jobs using, things other than a vehicle sometimes, right? And continuing to support the transit system that we have, which is a great benefit to many, many people of a variety of income levels in our community. So I just would like to echo people's comments and to say thank you to Councillor Vasic for bringing this forward, and really appreciate the information that you've provided to us today. Thank you.
Any other comments, Council? Seeing none, the motion's moved and seconded. All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you so much. So now we're on to notice of motion, and there's no notice of motion. Communications and correspondence, there's none. Unfinished business, Council, seeing none. Questions? Is there any questions? I have a couple of questions. So, the first is I wanted to share that I was at the Parkwood Mennonite Gala, where they celebrated 80 years of providing senior services to the community out of their Fairview location and 60 years out of their Parkwood location in my ward. And council will recall that we made a significant investment at Parkwood associated with building affordable housing for seniors. And I just wanted to let everyone know that the gala was a lovely evening. I was thankful to be able to bring a guest with me, so thank you, Councillor Vasic, for that. I'm sorry that your schedule otherwise prevented you to attend. And I wanted to send out kudos to Joel Cotter. He was recognized at the gala by the executive director for all of the really hard work that he put in to help facilitate their advancing of their project through our team. So I wanted to mention that. I wanted to bring it to council's attention that I've been asked to share with you a question whether or not council would be interested in potentially regulating wood-fired saunas in the backyards. And I didn't know if anyone wanted to run with that. Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on. The other thing I wanted to share was that I was super happy. Fox Hunt Neighborhood Association had received one of our neighborhood grants, and they held an event in, I'm gonna get this wrong, I think it was Blue Stream Park, because it's not the big park, it's not the Kings Court Park that I'm used to, but it was another park that's in the heart of the Fox Hunt neighborhood. And it's a park that we recently resurfaced the trail system and put an asphalt trail in. And I just wanted everyone from council to know that it was an amazing event. A lot of community members participated, and a lot of community members who roll to get to where they want to be. They're in electric wheelchairs or otherwise, were in attendance, and they spoke really highly of the accessibility of that space, and we spoke about the Kids Ability accessible playground that will be installed near, because there is an independent living center in the neighborhood, and so it was really exciting to see people using that trail. It received a lot of chalk art also. So it was really lovely. So I know that I missed the Albert McGregor Neighborhood Association event that welcomes students. I didn't know if you wanted to provide some insight on that, Councillor Wright.
Sure, I can do that. Thank you. Through you, Chair. Just, it was great to see my council colleagues there and city staff, so I really appreciate everybody showing up in Ward 7. That's always fun. The neighborhood was out in droves and managed to get kind of half of the barbecue in the non-rain portion of the afternoon. I did bring an umbrella, so I was okay, but we did end up pretty much all of us on KLG's porch at one point. So, you know, we look forward to those events every year, and it's great to see it up and running again in 2023.
Thanks. I realized that I merged from questions to new business, so I apologize for that. Was there any other questions? Okay, and anything else for new business? Yep, Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make note of that there's an event on Saturday. UW United College is partnering with Reception House for their annual fundraiser, Ride for Refuge. And so that is supporting Reception House to work with refugee youth and helping families build new lives in Waterloo region. So that does start at UW, and I believe it's a 3-hour event. And you can register for it online, and there is lunch. And there is a rest stop along the way. So it is a walking and a biking event.
That's awesome. Thank you. Mayor McCabe, did I see your hand up under?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to do a shout out and congratulate Shalom Counseling Services. I was at their event on Saturday morning. They've been in our community providing a sliding scale of affordable counseling for residents, approximately, well, $5,700 a year for 40 years. So they had a fundraiser to raise $40,000 and take 40,000 steps for 40 years. So just wanted to thank them for the continued great work that they do in our community. And also just wanted to build on Councillor Wright to just say thank you to KLG, who is such a great community organizer, for the work that she and Sebastian Kunda, and I don't remember the other ones, but she's just such a driving force in our community of good. So thanks for her for organizing the MACA event.
That's great. Councillor Vassic.
Thanks. It was a great event. The highlight for me was the giant container of cheese puffs. They were very good. Okay, 3 ward events. On this past weekend, there were 2. A bake sale, just a couple of kids having a bake sale, raising money to save up for things they want, and almost all was gone. It's just cute when kids have sales in the neighborhood. I loved it. And it's because the neighborhood group posted on social media. So you just got these like 4 ladies who just, whenever they're out and about, they just take photos and share it. And otherwise I wouldn't have known because I don't live in that specific area. So I rarely walk there. So just kind of the grassroots stuff that's going on in the neighborhood, which is really nice to see. And it's because of the neighborhoods team, like you were saying, Councillor Hanmar. The Braeside Avenue has a street party every year, and they had their street party this past weekend with free snow cones. I love cheese puffs. I love snow cones. And they had, you know, chips and the games. And Eric Traplin was there with bubbles, you know, like bubbles you blow with a bubble machine. Sorry. And then some lions. They did a lion dance. The Waterloo Kung Fu Academy came and did a lion dance. So we continue to hear about the dragons from my 2-year-old. They were lions. Anyways, it was really nice to be out, nice to hear from people who have concerns and also good suggestions. And this coming weekend, Dunvegan community, there's a resident who's been wanting to put a vegetable garden in Dunvegan Park. And so they're having an event this Wednesday from 5 to 6:30 for the neighborhood. And it's great news because we just approved the new community garden policy. So they're going to have a lot of support, and staff are going out on Wednesday as well. So lots of really great stuff happening because of the neighborhoods team.
It's awesome. Thank you so much. Any other new business? Yep, Councillor Wright.
I'm just going to share that I did stand in for the mayor at the Terry Fox Run. And this was Terry Fox Run 2023 for Waterloo. It was in Waterloo Park, so thanks to the city for your assistance in making that possible. They raised $50,000.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and you know, in the opening remarks, it was noted just how much money we've raised over time, and it's over $1 million just from Waterloo's runs. So that's really impressive and just goes to show the level of support there is for cancer research in this community. Some very touching remarks from some of our local dignitaries, and it was great to be there and be part of it. So thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Bodley.
Sorry, one last thing. Just highlight that this Saturday is Lumen and that there are already two large installations, one in the square and one in Waterloo Park, that are really contributing to the vibrancy. I was out people watching on Friday, and it was really cool to see how people interacting with the exhibit in the square. And so just wanted to give a big thanks to our arts and culture team for putting on what's going to be a really incredible event this Saturday. It's one of my favorite things that we do, so I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's great. I'm looking forward to it too. All right, is there any other new business? Okay, seeing none, there's enactment of bylaws. Council, do I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Hanmer, seconded by Councillor Wright. All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. And adjournment. Move to adjourn. Councillor Rowe, Councillor Bodley, all those in favor? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Pardon? Oh, thanks.